Well, thank you for joining us today, Barry. So, for the audience who don't know, can you give them a little bit of background about yourself and what it is you do?
Okay, my name is Barry B. Mixon, and I am a gemological storyteller. What I do is I take the techniques, concepts, the art, science, history, and magic of gemstones, precious metals, and fine jewelry, and I use it as a bridge, or as I like to call it, a template or an inception point to get people to start to discover the value of their own stories.
So that was a lot. So can you break it down for how you got started in that?
I actually, I got started in that from, I was homeless 29 years ago, and literally this month. Um, and it wasn't because of alcohol or drugs or anything else. It was really because of anger. I didn't know my own value. Despite having 3 degrees, and I was in the Marine Corps for 14 years, I was constantly basically made to feel like I was a rock. So out of that experience, I began to think about what is value, and the universe, God just led me towards gemology, and I started studying about gemstones. And the thing that got me about gemstones wasn't so much just the bling bling aspect of it, but it was more of the way people see value. So like you and I just met 5 minutes ago, and if I said diamonds, rubies, emeralds, sapphires, pearls, you would know, whether you knew it, whether you own one or not, you would understand the value of that. And I just started thinking, what if people started treating each other like that? Just like, if I would say, someone says maybe next week, did you talk to Mr. Arthur? Yeah. They were like, wait a minute, you talked to Mr. Arthur from the Southland Journal? Yeah. Oh my God, what was that like? Because if they knew your story, if they knew who you were, they would be as excited about you as if I said, this is your diamond. I saw this diamond. So it's all about stories. It's the most important thing that you can ever do in your life is to tell a story. So because jewelry has its own it has a built-in value, inherent value, then I can make that jump to people. And many of the same characteristics that I find when I appraise gemstones is the same or similar characteristics I find in people.
All right. So as far as a good example of a story, I don't know if you can share one, but can you think of an example?
An example of jewelry by itself, or making the, okay, so let's say racism. Okay, I can talk about, when I work for companies or schools, I can talk about serious issues like racism, which might make people feel uncomfortable. But yet, if I said a red diamond or a blue sapphire, we don't have problems with color. There's no such thing as racism in gemology, because in gemology, the more color you have, the more value you have. But yet a colorless diamond would never be jealous of a ruby, because a diamond understands it comes in every color of the rainbow. So the way we look at color, or let's say age, we have a lot of, I'm 61, so there's ageism, things of this. But it's funny, the average diamond is at least 600 million years old, but yet you will never have somebody say, oh, I don't want that, it's just too old. I don't want that, take that back. The same thing with size. This diamond, if it was real, this would be a 4,600 carat diamond. If you give this to the person that you love, I guarantee you, your girlfriend would never say, oh no, honey, take that back. It's too fat. So I can make those analogies. How is it that we can talk about gemstones and value gemstones in that way, but yet we don't value ours? And gemstones may have 2 or 3 elements in it, and we have those elements and more as living beings.
So that was a good example and a good connection. As far as you're talking about gemstones, and one of the things that comes to mind is the jewelry industry and how we kind of have like a lack of diversity. Like I'll admit, before this conversation, I didn't know that we had a Black gemologist. Like, so what would you say about equity and kind of bridging the gap between career fields, especially in gemology, that people may not know about?
Gemology is a really interesting field, and you're right. There's not a lot of diversity. I've been studying gemology for about 18 years. Gemological Institute of America first, and then because I'm a scientist, my degrees in biology, chemistry, biochem. I wanted a more scientific slant, so then I became a student and graduate of the Gemological Gemological Association of Great Britain. So there's two major schools. There's GIA, Gemological Institute of America, and then GEMA, the Gemological Association of Great Britain. And then I went to Northwestern for appraisal studies. And there's not a lot of African-American representation, or well, I won't say people of color, because there's a lot of people from India, there's a lot of Africans and people from other, but as far as African-Americans, there's not a lot of representation. And it's because, well, the field is expensive. It costs a lot of money to buy the equipment, just something like a loop. This is called a loop, you know, the thing that you see, the magnifier. Well, basically, this is something like $300, just a good quality one. So a lot of it is just price of what it costs to get into the field. There's a lot of education, there's a lot of science. So again, it's just a matter of awareness. A lot of people of color are not aware of the opportunities that exist in gemology, which is really funny, because the whole history of mankind really revolves around gemstones. And the people who, most of the time, 90% of the time, the people who have dug up the gemstones or cut it or mined it are people of color. So I decided, once I got into it, to change the dynamics. You know, how can I not just stand behind a counter and say, hi, can I help you? Let me get into the art, science, history, and magic of it. Because major things in history, the French Revolution happened because of a diamond necklace. The wars that we saw between Spain and England happened over a pearl. So the gold rush, the guy who actually had the land where the gold rush was found, he died years later broke, because he didn't want the gold, he wanted the land. So when you think about it, then of course, Africa, things. So when you think about how much people of color have been a part of this industry, I wanted to approach it in a way where it wasn't them against us. It was just, how is gemstones seen throughout the world? And when you look at it like that, there's the inclusiveness that I strive for, to get people to understand that. So when someone says, oh, I don't want to go to that terrible country. Well, guess what? Your wife, that terrible country that you hate, or those people, your wife is wearing that gemstone that comes from that country. Oh, I didn't know. So it's a different conversation.
Well, thank you for sharing that. And that's another great insight. So we're gonna go back a little bit and then move forward. So can you tell us a little bit about your the Marine Corps, I believe you said earlier, and then how that kind of led you towards being a scientist? Or
I was proud of being a Marine, United States Marine. I've been in the Marine Corps for 14 years. And notice I said I was still a Marine. You never stop being a Marine. And once a Marine, always a Marine. I'm probably more Marine now than I was 40 years ago. So I was in from 78 to 92, Iraq, Afghanistan. I was working in Iraq when the Iraqis were our friends. I was involved with the Iranian hostage crisis, and I was a navigator on C-130s. So there was a lot of, there was always science in my life. I was always interested in science. And so when I got out of the Marine Corps, at least active duty, I went to State University in New York. I'm originally from New York, Harlem, New York. And I just started getting into it. And then I moved to Chicago in the winter of 1992. In fact, that's when I became homeless for a year. I competed in the World Championship of Public Speaking in Toastmasters. And that was the title of my speech in the winter of 1992. And gemology, I had already had degrees in it, but when I started just looking at my life and looking at value, here I was on the streets of Chicago, homeless with 3 degrees. I had traveled, I had, war medals and all these other stuff, but here I am. And it just started getting me to think about, what is value? What is value? No one, in my speech, I said, I used to envy the people that could sing and dance, because I can't sing and I can't dance, but nobody wants to hear biochemistry from a bum. Nobody wants to give you a job when you can't fill out the second line of that application. You know, the one that says address. So it just kind of came all together when I started studying gemstones, really just as a fluke. I had my business partner is a jewelry designer, and she had a problem doing a show. And she asked me about blue diamonds. And as a chemist, I knew why blue diamonds were blue. And she said, you ever think about getting into this field? And I was just like, do Black people do this? You know, I'm from New York, and my name is Barry, which is a very, you know, a lot of Jewish people have that name, Jewish boys, but I never thought about it. But as I started studying it, again, it wasn't the bling bling. It was just how the whole history of mankind revolves around gemstones, either directly or indirectly. Columbus didn't come here for travel. He came here for gold, you know, I think so. That's how the whole evolution and the movement towards getting into gemology, understanding that if we see gemstones like this, why can't we see people in a similar way? And that's how I make that analogy between people and gemstones.
Well, you just dropped a lot of gems, no pun intended. But now we'll fast forward a little bit. I know that you've received a lot of accolades and things over the years. And do you want to talk about a few of them?
Oh, wow. I've been extremely blessed. There's a book that I have that really changed my life called As a Man Thinketh. And there's a section in there that talks about, well, the whole book is, but really what you think about, you bring about. So from that experience of being homeless from 92 to 93, I went on to President Obama literally kind of recruited me to get into the teaching field. So I became a distinguished teacher for the Chicago public school system. I competed in the World Championship of Public Speaking, did not win, got to the finals. It was wonderful. Didn't even place, but got to the finals. Last year, I was the recipient of the 2020 Man of Excellence Award for the Chicago Defender. I was literally honored to receive a proclamation from the state of New York alongside the greatest Olympian of all time, Bob Beamon. Bob Beamon went to my high school. I was the keynote speaker. They presented him with a proclamation for the state of New York. And then they said, we have one other person. And when I'm sitting and listening, like, who's the other person? And they started saying my bio. I'm like, oh my God. And just 2 weeks ago, actually about a month ago, I was called up and told that I am the 2021-2022 Global Educator of the Year. Because once COVID started happening, I was already going back and forth overseas. I practically live in France at least 4 or 5 months out of the year before COVID hit. And I started teaching online. So now I teach in 5 continents. And from there, February 19th, Black Tie Affair, I'm going to receive an Oscar as the Global Teacher of the Year from Congressman Danny Davis. Yeah. Who I was homeless in his district. So I can't wait to see him and thank him and just let him, you did a good job. Here I am. So.
All right. So yeah.
Oh, last one last thing. I wrote a book as a veteran. I wrote a book called Suited for Service. I co-authored a book. Myself and about 7 other veterans got together in honor of 9/11 and told about our experiences, Army, Navy, Air Force, Marine Corps. How did we become who we became? And a lot of us is because of what we learned during our time in the service.
Man, many accolades. Now, as far as you mentioned that you are an educator. Now, for today's generation of youth, or even advice that you would give to your younger self, what would it be? Like 1 or 2 pieces of advice?
Tell a story. The whole reason why kids are not into school is because the way I learned as a 61-year-old man is not the way kids learn now. I have a niece and nephew who are like my son and daughter, and they learn off of this, YouTube and all TikTok and things. So in order to engage them, you have to give them a reason to study. So what I do, and the reason why I was able to achieve so much in education, is because when a kid tells me, like my first kid in CPS, Jody L. He told me from day one, Mr. Mixon, I'm just going to be honest with you. I don't like science. I'm like, okay. And he thought he was going to, push my buttons. And 2 days later, I said, what do you like? He says, I like beautiful, young, nice looking boy, strong. He was like, I'm into soccer. He thought he was going to be a pro. And I was like, oh, I got you. He says, what do you mean? And I said, science is all in soccer. And to make a long story short, he would be outside kicking the ball. And, I'm old, I'm ancient to them. I'm like, oh, Jody, I can do it. He's like, you can't do this, Mr. Mixon. I said, all you have to do is just kick it. And he was like explaining to me how it works. And I said, oh, you mean you're talking about physics? Nah, you can't be talking about physics. That doesn't exist. And he graduated, and I saw him 2 years later. He was involved with MIT. He doesn't even play soccer anymore. He was involved with MIT. I mean, as a scientist, you're like talking about Mecca. And he told me that he thanked me. He says, now I understand what you were talking about science. And I'm like, I'm tearing up at the bus stop. I couldn't believe it. But tell a story. If I understood the value of my story when I was younger, a lot of the things that I went through, I wouldn't have had to go through. And that's the promise I made to God when I was homeless, December 15th, 1992, when I thought life was over. And I promised God that if I ever got out of this, I would spend the rest of my life getting people to understand their value. And God that's why I think I was led to gemology, because everybody understands the value of a diamond, of a ruby, and emerald. But we need to get people to understand our value, and not just Black people, but people in general. What is the value of your story? And once you understand that value, your opinion of someone increases, because now you know who they are. So that would be the advisement I would give. Learn stories, learn how the power of stories, and learn about my own story. And then I think life is wonderful now, but life would have been different had I known my own story, because that was my problem. I was angry because I thought I was a rock. I didn't have any value to myself.
Well, thank you for sharing that. And I'm sure that our audience is going to get a lot out of your message. Now, is there anything else that you want to leave our audience with?
I have a television show, a weekly streaming show called Gem Hunters Stories. It's on YouTube. It's on Wednesdays, every Wednesday at 8 a.m. And what I do is I literally put to practice everything I just said in this interview. Literally every week, I look at different gemstones, different periods of time, different times in history, different ways of looking at it. So in fact, this week, I showed a video a picture of a beautiful African-American woman that was on the screen. And some of my viewers, in fact, let me see if I have her picture in the back. Yes, I showed a picture of this woman last week. And some women my viewers were saying, that's not fair. You always show these pretty women and everything. What about when you talk about beauty? What about everybody else? So, and I thought that was an interesting point. So this week is going to be called What is Beauty? Because when you look at a ring that you've gotten, a necklace, pendant, it may not be the Hope diamond. It may not be the Tiffany diamond that Beyonce is wearing, but that diamond has value to you because your brother, your father, your husband gave that value to you. You are beautiful. You may not look like Rihanna, but your husband, your boyfriend doesn't care, because to you, you are beautiful. So beauty, the same way we look at beauty, and we're going to Zales or Whitehall or something like this, you're not going there for $10,000. The same ring that Nicki Minaj got is not the ring that you're going to get. But the ring that you do get is beautiful to you. It has value to you. So so this week's show, Wednesday, 8 o'clock, Gem Hunter Stories, we'll be talking about what is beauty.
All right. Well, I'll make sure that our readers and listeners go and check out the story.
Thank you.
Thank you for your time.